very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, may I just add to Marco's welcome as well. There are so many people here from the housing sector and people who are building the buildings and people who are working in the industry, and I think they're most welcome, as well as, of course, the residents. And a particular welcome to the Prime Minister, to the members of Parliament. And I want to single out Adam Vaughan and Marco Mendicino. They are people. Adam has worked tirelessly on this long before he was a member of Parliament and has continued to do so. And Marco, as somebody very involved in the Toronto caucus of the Liberal government, has been someone that has constantly taken up the challenge of addressing this issue. Peter Milchin has been an incredible, I'll call it a breath of fresh air, because that's what it's been since he's been the Minister of Housing. Just in a few weeks, we've made multiple announcements to help people who need help and to get going on some of the housing we need to do. And then, of course, my three colleagues who are here today, Deputy Mayor and Housing Advocate Anna Bailau, Councillor Josh Cole, and they have both, again, been people that have worked tirelessly on this file. You know, the Prime Minister made indirect reference to this, but just a year ago, I welcomed another group to Toronto to talk about housing. We invited the big city mayors from across the country to come here and join some housing experts. We hosted a Toronto Housing Summit in Regent Park in 2016. And we rang an alarm bell on a crisis that is facing our Canadian cities. And together we talked about the increasing pressure places like Toronto, and not limited to Toronto, were facing related to the repair and operations of our social housing. It was a crisis that we drew attention to and the consequent impact that was having on homelessness and about increasing shelter capacity. We talked about the operations and repair of our social housing and the fact we just weren't able to get it done by ourselves. And of course, we discussed the more broadly felt strains that occur when people can't afford to live in our biggest city and in all of our biggest cities or access the opportunities that safe and reliable housing can provide. We said, as big city mayors, loud and clear, that when housing is in crisis, the impacts are real and they are profound, cutting across all ages and all income levels and producing widespread social and economic negative impacts. The big city mayors presented 7 principles for housing that we believed would produce the groundwork for real change. And it's not always the case that you can stand a year later, only a year later, and be able to say that today we have received a response from our federal government, and it is a response that is responsive to all of those points that we made. For the first time in 50 years, if not ever, but there have been attempts before, but the first time in 50 years in a meaningful way, we have a national housing strategy delivered here today by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And I echo the thanks of Peter Milchin in saying thank you, Prime Minister. We have a Prime Minister and a Minister of Housing, Jean-Yves Duclos, because he's been in my office many a time too since that meeting a year ago, who have committed to re-entering the national conversation on housing in a meaningful way. In fact, it isn't even about a conversation. It's about delivering meaningful results. And they've delivered on that promise, aided in the case of Toronto's acute needs by MPs like Adam Vaughan and Marco Mendicino and Julie Zarowitz. We have a strategy that has responded to the needs of Canadians and to the advocates, cities and housing experts, many of whom are here today, and I'm glad they are, because they've worked with the federal government, with the provincial government and with the cities to outline our priorities and our perspectives across a range of housing needs. Cette stratégie nationale, combinée aux initiatives provinciales, peut faire une grande différence pour la qualité de vie et la qualité du logement de certains de nos concitoyens les plus vulnérables. Le gouvernement fédéral a suivi. Maintenant, nous devons y arriver ensemble. We have a strategy that has responded to the needs of Canadians. The housing strategy released today provides a framework for meaningful action on housing issues across the country, but in particular for housing issues here in Toronto. It demonstrates real partnership, a real understanding of the issues, and it shows that the federal government listened to our feedback and understood our priorities. Here in Toronto, this strategy and funding will help us repair our social housing, and this will keep a roof, a proper and a fit roof, over the heads of more than 60,000 Toronto households. It was simply not sensible for property taxpayers alone to undertake these repairs, nor was it right not to make the repairs. And now, together with the initiatives undertaken by the province, some of which we've been able to announce together recently, with hopefully more to come, we have a federal government which is saying yes to doing something for those 60,000 households. The strategy will also help us make progress on our supply of affordable housing, combat homelessness, and it will help us address the wide continuum of housing needs, focusing on the most vulnerable. And again, I draw attention to the availability of funds under this strategy for supportive housing. Today in this city, there are far too many people who are suffering from mental illness, victims of domestic violence, who are living, not spending the night, they're living in shelters. They need supportive housing. Housing with help. And again, this strategy combined with recent Ontario government initiatives give me great reason for hope, and they should give the people of Toronto, especially the most vulnerable, reasons for hope. Toronto welcomes this new strategy, which responds to many of City Council's priorities, as well as to the needs of our citizens and to the advocacy of our many housing leaders, advocacy groups and community members, all of whom deserve credit as well for getting us to this important moment. The housing strategy correctly identifies the need for delivery of housing solutions through local partnership, which are best designed and delivered by and in local communities and neighbourhoods by both the public and private and non-profit sectors. And it also provides us with the funding certainty that has been absent for decades, allowing us to plan our own actions and investments to move forward with certainty and purpose. There's much hard work ahead, and so much to do to make sure that the purpose and impact of this strategy is realized. May I say respectfully, but directly, as a citizen and as Mayor of Canada's biggest city, to my two colleagues from the two other governments, that it will be a tragedy for people who need us now if we let differences between governments on how to do this get in the way of actually, finally, doing something. And so I look forward to working with both of these governments, and I pledge myself to working constructively with them with a view to implementing this strategy, implementing the strategy of the provincial and the city governments to make sure that we do what people expect us to do, which is to get the housing built, get the housing repaired, put the supportive housing in place, and I look forward in particular to continuing to work in partnership with the Government of Ontario under the leadership of Peter Milchen and Premier Kathleen Wynne, and the Government of Canada under the leadership of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to make sure that we produce the best possible outcomes for all of the 3 million people who call Toronto home. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you, Mayor, and we are going to get it done with partners like you. At this time, I'd like to invite the Prime Minister back up to the podium to take questions from the media. Monsieur le Premier Ministre.
Thank you, Marco.
Première question.
Bonjour, Philippe Leblanc de Radio-Canada, en français, but also in English, please. Vous annoncez des cibles dans votre stratégie, des cibles précises, mais déjà, certaines personnes, des groupes affirment que c'est loin d'être suffisant parce qu'il y a beaucoup de rattrapage à faire. Qu'est-ce que vous leur répondez?
On reconnaît le besoin de faire du rattrapage. Pendant trop longtemps, le gouvernement fédéral s'est enlevé du sphère du logement, particulièrement du logement abordable. Le gouvernement précédent n'en faisait pas du tout une priorité. Alors effectivement, on a beaucoup de travail à faire. C'est pour ça que nous faisons l'annonce aujourd'hui de tant d'investissements qui reconnaît qu'il faut accélérer le rythme de création de nouveaux logements et de réparation d'anciens logements. C'est pour ça qu'on va accroître de 4 fois les investissements, la création de nouveaux logements et de 3 fois la réparation d'anciens de stocks existants comparé à ce qui s'y fait entre 2005 et 2015. Mais on reconnaît qu'on a beaucoup de travail à faire. C'est une grande lancée d'un réengagement long terme du gouvernement fédéral en matière de logement et on a très hâte de travailler avec les provinces, avec les municipalités pour y arriver. We recognize that for far too long the federal government has been stepping away or has stepped away from investments in housing, particularly the last government for 10 years underinvested in housing and didn't feel that housing was a priority that the federal government needed to concern itself with. We profoundly disagree, and we heard that from Canadians and organizations across the country, that there needs to be a federal presence now and for the long term in housing. And that's why the announcement we're making today recognizes the need to accelerate the pace of investments. We're increasing by 4 times the amount of new constructions we're creating in affordable housing, and increasing by 3 times over the 2005 to 2015 period the amount of repairs and refurbishments we're doing. There is massive needs across the country, and this will go a long way towards meeting those needs and helping Canadians.
Et en relance, vous devrez travailler avec les provinces, travailler avec les territoires. Le maire Tory a fait référence, il y a des différences de vision, des différences d'opinion dans cette matière-là. Comment faites-vous pour être optimiste que vous allez pouvoir mettre en place et vous entendre avec les provinces et les territoires cette stratégie?
Je peux dire très simplement, il n'y a aucun maire, il n'y a aucun premier ministre provincial ou territorial qui ne croit pas que le logement est un défi fondamental auquel nous nous devons d'adresser. Évidemment, les besoins concrets dans une ville comme Vancouver, ça va être différent des défis concrets dans une ville comme Québec ou comme Halifax ou comme une petite communauté dans le nord de la Saskatchewan. C'est en travaillant avec les experts sur le terrain, avec ceux qui connaissent les besoins de leur région et de leur communauté, qu'on va pouvoir répondre de façon adéquate aux besoins variés à travers le pays. There is not a single mayor or premier across this country that doesn't recognize that housing represents a real challenge for Canadians. We look forward to working with all of them, understanding that the needs and the conditions and the situations are different from Vancouver to Quebec City, from Montreal to Toronto, from Rimouski to small communities in northern Saskatchewan, for example. We're going to keep working in a thoughtful way to meet the challenges that Canadians are facing. Because regardless of the order of government, we're all serving the same citizens, and citizens expect that all orders of government address the housing situations. Merci.
Janie Llewellyn, CBC. Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. I have a question in English, et appelé en français, s'il vous plaît. My question is, why is most of the money for these projects not going to start flowing until after the 2019 election?
Very simply, the need has been so great, and the opportunity we have for a once-in-a-generation investment requires us to get it right. We know that housing advocates and organizations across this country have long called for different and specific solutions. The provinces, for example, have different perspectives on how we're going to best make sure that, for example, the Canada Housing Benefit, which will be a portable benefit that will stay with families instead of be anchored in place, will take some time to determine exactly what the right model is. We know that there is going to need to be time for the hardworking folks who are working on this building and others to get them done so we can have families move in. We are looking at the realistic horizon that is going to not just put a Band-Aid on the problem, but create the kind of deep change and lasting impact that we know Canadians are going to need. When we say that the federal government is back for the long term, we mean it. And that starts with getting it right from the very beginning.
En français?
Oui. On sait que c'est une situation très complexe avec beaucoup de particularités à travers le pays. C'est pour ça que nous nous sommes engagés à le faire correctement, à parler avec les partenaires, à investir de la bonne façon, à créer les bénéfices de la meilleure façon à ce que ça ait l'impact, pas juste pour maintenant, mais pour des générations à venir. On sait que le gouvernement fédéral se doit d'être réengagé à un niveau long terme, et pour ça, il faut qu'on enligne ça de la bonne façon.
Hi, Prime Minister Justin Ling, freelance. Thanks for doing this, especially outside. I wanted to ask you about a decision that was made, or a decision that appears to be in progress in the U.S. Donald Trump and the FCC appear set to forge ahead with plans to repeal net neutrality. That could have a huge impact for Canadian consumers and especially Canadian startups who could be impacted by slower speeds or higher costs. Do you have any plans to speak to the President about this, or any plans to assure Canadian business that they won't be impacted?
I am very concerned about the attacks on net neutrality. Net neutrality is something that is essential for small business.